remember when I started doing it in like 2010, I thought I was like a genius. I was like, wow, I've really cracked the code here.
Hi, everyone. Today on Spill the Paint, we have artist Paul Jackson. Paul is known for his noir pop art. Is that how you describe it?
Sure.
Sure. All right. So we'll jump right in with a bunch of questions and learn all of Paul's secrets.
Oh, no. You know what this is? Oh, no, my screen. You can't learn my secrets. There's no secrets.
Hey, we don't gatekeep on this podcast. We share everything.
Yeah,
everything. How do you decide on a subject or theme for your work?
You said they weren't going to be hard.
Well, you know,
that is a good question. I think honestly, it's just a natural urge I lean into sort of like slightly darker themes because I feel like it's part of who I am, to be honest with you. I couldn't tell you why that is. I'm not a dark person. I'm not like a negative person. I think artists are mostly influenced with what happens in their lives, their surroundings. Like, I feel like my art has a sense of humor to it. You know, I'm English. I was brought up in England, and there is a huge part of being British. I think you kind of deal with a lot of things through making people laugh or making a joke out of things. And I feel like I have a humorous element to my work without it being stupid. There's a humorous element to it with a slight twist of darkness and macabre. And I feel like I think like death is more exciting than life sometimes.
Well,
visually,
you are dark.
And I don't have a dark soul, and I don't wish to just paint sort of, I don't paint gore or anything, but I just find it a bit more interesting, and I like finding the light in the darkness. I feel like there's a lot of light within the darkness. I think it's also a subject that people are scared to approach sometimes. So I just like to sort of dip my toes in it as much as I can without it being a focal point consistently.
Right.
So I feel like I just take each piece case by case, and I am inspired by events like that happen around me. I try not to be too political about things, but sometimes it's hard not to be. And there's always like a little bit of an influence of like modern events and modern culture. So it's a mixed bag, really.
Yeah, because there's some series of yours that are more, the skull extraction, but then there are some that are really more pop art type of stuff.
Yeah.
Based on that, do you sketch a lot? Do you do a pre-sketch or some doodles to kind of figure out what your composition is going to be? Like, do you do that in advance before you start the final piece?
Yeah, always. I mean, everything I do comes from a thumbnail sketch in my sketchbook. So like little drawings, sort of this big, like little scribbles. I can show you some examples. So like most things will come from little sketches, little scribbles. They're not detailed. There's not much nuance to them. It's mainly about sort of just like shapes, to be honest with you, like just finding shapes and whatnot. So yeah, like it all kind of starts from there. When I get down to the initial piece, like the final piece, I use Photoshop a lot because it's really helpful to sort of get images into one place quickly, and then to cut things out and to like move stuff around, basically create the collage of the image and the shape. And I think a lot of artists do that actually. Yes. And I remember when I started doing it in like 2010, I thought I was like a genius. I was like, wow, I've really cracked the code here. Turns out everyone was doing it. So I find all the images that I like, and then I try to sort of merge them into the shape that matches my thumbnail, and then I'll add stuff to that. I'll sketch over that. It's like a whole process that normally takes shape once I'm happy with it. Depending on what I'm working on, if I'm working on scratchboard or clayboard, I will trace that image onto that. Well, especially scratchboard, because scratchboard's black, so it's really hard to. You can't like sketch on it. So you kind of have to get the outline directly onto it very quickly, like very clearly. And so I'll use tracing paper for that. And then you have to kind of sketch out or scratch the lines into it so you can see it. Otherwise you can't see it. It's a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. So back to your question. Yeah, initially sketch, and then I'll reference materials from wherever I need to reference it from, books, internet, maybe my own photographs, maybe a sketch I've done. It's a whole mix mashup essentially. So yeah, but it all starts from a sketch. Everything starts from a sketch, an idea. Everything's an idea, and then an initial sort of like rough outline shape. That's where it all begins for me.
Yeah, I'm the same. I have a lot of, I do exactly like you do actually. I have little squares in my sketchbook, and it's like, oh, this is my canvas. What's funny is that a lot of my composition end up being the same. So I have a bunch of little squares that all look the same. It's like, oh, the head, this is a little body. It's very, very similar.
Do you have to write notes next to it to be like to write what's different about that one to this one?
Well, sometimes it's something stupid, like a note like pink shirt, red bow. And it's so stupid, but it's just somehow it's just to remind myself what the idea was or what the inspiration was. But
Absolutely.
It's a bit silly, but I use Photoshop as well. I think that's
it's funny. I think everyone does, and I was going to mention this a minute ago, but now with AI, a lot of artists are just using AI as reference. I haven't done that yet. I'm not against doing it, to be honest with you. I don't really know. I feel like the whole Photoshop thing was probably once upon a time frowned upon in itself.
Yes.
And now there's AI where you can literally just type in your reference point and it will create this image that's never been seen by anyone else before.
Right.
And you can just paint it.
Yes.
I don't know. I do feel like that's one step too far, personally. I feel like I like the idea of collaging it myself and sourcing images, and I find that I'm attached to the image more and I'm more sort of connected to it because I've created that particular layout and that shape on my own.
Right.
Whereas the AI thing, I don't know. I feel like you're a bit disconnected from it. You're basically just rendering shit at that point. Rendering shit. You're not connected to the idea as much. I might be wrong. I might change my mind on that. I don't know. I'm not anti-AI or anything. I know a lot of people hate AI. I think there's a lot of great use cases for it that we haven't figured out yet. And it's always art's always the first thing with tech that gets like, it finds this stuff out and then everyone's like, it's same with NFTs. Like we hate blockchain NFTs because art is ruined by it, and then AI, same thing, ruined art by it. But I think eventually it will all like level down and become what it's going to be. That's the most vague statement I've ever said, but it will just like everything comes out in the wash eventually. You know what I mean?
Right. I think the idea as an artist is to make sure that everything at some point is filtered by your own mind.
I agree.
And by your own hand, is regardless of where your references come from. If it's photograph or collage on Photoshop of a bunch of different images, or your own photograph, or to an extent AI, I think it needs to be filtered by your hand and your mind. So it needs to go through your process, like, this that represent me or my style, or does that feel natural? And then when you produce the actual work with your hand, or even if a digital artist, if you use digital brushes, your hand becomes the filter. Like if we talk in terms of,
I like the way you said that, actually. Like you literally everything comes through your brain, you filter it down, and then you produce the work, and that's your art, right?
That's right. Exactly. We're going to talk about different materials that you use, but I feel like you use a lot of different stuff. So I heard you talk about clayboard, scratchboard. I also did a bit of research about when you do work on paper, but you also in the recent years been doing really big pieces on canvas, which I think is also interesting when it comes to scale, and we can talk about it later. Where your drawing stuff is a smaller scale, and then your drawing is a mid scale, and then your paintings are huge, which is kind of interesting how your material leads the size. Do you want to educate us a little bit more about maybe scratchboard and clayboard?
When I first sort of started as a professional artist, I was creating mostly t-shirt designs and record covers for bands and music industry overall, and it was all pen on paper. I did that for one reason, and one reason only, actually, which was for screen printing. So I like the idea of like the ink on paper being very like crystal clear, because prior to that I was doing a lot of pencil drawing, which doesn't translate as well to t-shirt printing. So I moved over to pen on paper because of the translation into printing. And I just kind of got into that world, and I was very busy for a long time doing that. And then Instagram happened around 2013, and then your whole world opens up to all these different artists and different people doing similar things to you. And I learned loads from these amazing artists, like poster artists, Aaron Hawkey, Mike Sutphin, Brandon Holt, and these guys. Well, especially Brandon, he was like, "Have you heard of clayboard?" And I was like, no, I don't know what clayboard is. And he's like, basically, in fact, so no, sorry, because I was doing scratchboard as well. I did like a couple of scratchboard drawings, which is I'll come to shortly. But scratchboard essentially is like a black surface, and you scratch into it. You scratch light into darkness. This guy saw me drawing. He saw my ink on paper. Then he saw my scratchboards. And he was like, have you heard of clayboard? And essentially, clayboard is a cross between both. So it starts white like this. It starts white, and you can ink onto it, and then you can scratch into the ink. So you can both draw and scratch. So this is a very tiny drawing. You can see this is actually, I did this for Notorious B.I.G. print a while ago, but this is stippled in great detail. It's actually ridiculous when I look at it, because I don't know if I could do this again. My eyes aren't as good as they were. But so
is it made of clay, or traditionally was made of clay? Is it like a layer of plaster?
Yeah,
That's
it's
what
like
I'm
a
thinking.
very, very thin layer of white clay, basically super thin, but very smooth, really nice to draw on. And then you can scratch into the ink. So you can put black ink down, and then you can scratch into the black to create white straight lines or scratchy lines. It's great for hair.
So it's very absorbent, because clay
is absorbent.
very
Yeah,
porous.
I mean, you don't have to use ink on it. You can use pencil on it, paint. You can use anything on it. I find ink the best thing to use for me personally, and like airbrush. I had to airbrush onto it, because you can create like a mid-tone of airbrush. This is a good example of it. So this was for Queens of the Stone Age. So this is all inked onto there originally. And then you can see, like, for example, like here, I've scratched white lines into the ink. So you get that great level of dynamism in it. You know, you can work both ways, backwards and forwards, black, white, black, white. So I find that super helpful. The pressure's off. You know, you can be like, oh, if I've ruined something, I'll just go over it with some black ink, or I can
how
deep into it.
How deep can you go when you scratch? Is it millimeter?
You don't need to go very deep. You don't need to. Yeah, it's actually quite delicate. You can scratch in really deep if you like. You are at risk of getting through to the wood if you go too hard.
Got it.
Which you don't want to do, obviously. But I don't think you'll do that, because you've got to really put some strength into that, which you wouldn't want to do.
When you're scratching, you're using an X-Acto knife. Is that what we're talking about here?
Well, there's tools like specific tools like this, which is like a scratching tool. But I do use an X-Acto knife, because I find. Actually, I have this weird kind of foam grip on it, which I just found. I think they're for kids, actually. But I found it was just like much nicer to use, to like, it helped my hands not ache as much. I use an X-Acto knife because I can change the knives out. For each drawing, I'll change the knife out so it's fresh, really sharp tip. You get really nice details on that, and it's a good way to sort of line it out first, especially if you're working on scratchboard first, because obviously this starts out black. So you've got to get a really nice light outline on it. So I like to scratch a very fine outline on it, so I can see where I'm working and the area I'm working in.
So you're using the same tools for your clay boards and your
correct, yeah. The only difference is that I'm with a clay board. When you start white, you're predominantly using ink. Right. And with a scratch board starting black, you're predominantly scratching with a scratch tool. But you can also ink over this. For example, this is all scratched into the clay board, but I'm pretty sure I've added some of these dots with black ink, so you can ink on top of this as well, although it's not as, once you've scratched into it, it creates a bit of it's a scratched surface, so it's not as smooth, but it's good for like stippling over and just like highlighting shadows and whatnot. I find it a really versatile surface to work on, but like you can even push it a bit further. With this piece, I've actually airbrushed. I'll take this out actually and get some mood reflections here. I've actually airbrushed all the midtones as well. So the first thing I did was I put the black shadows on it, and then I airbrushed all the midtones, and then I scratched in all the lightness. So you create so many different tones. Like you can actually feel the depth of those guys standing closer to you, which I love. So this is a new sort of technique that I'm using. And I find the airbrush is, again, a super versatile tool, because you can use it for detail, you can use it for like highlighting stuff, you can also use it for like fine art and just create. You can go nuts with it. Basically, you can take the end off and just you can squirt like splatty kind of like textures and stuff, and I find it really exciting. And that kind of leads into my larger pieces where I kind of use a mixture of all these techniques on like a larger canvas.
Let me ask you a few questions about what we just talked about.
So
clayboard and scratch boards, where do you find those, and do you have a preferred brand?
Oh yeah. Ampersand, basically. They are the brand that I don't know if there's any other brand that does it, but if there is, I haven't heard of them. But Ampersand's the one I use. They create all kinds of different boards, from scratch boards, clay boards, canvas boards, and then just basic wood boards. And they actually make all the like cradles as well for it. Because like clay board comes in different sort of thicknesses. So this is a cradled clay board.
Right.
This is 7/8.
It means that it's
which means
wood at the back
around it.
Yep.
And then like this piece, for example, is 1/8 of an inch, so very thin. And they all come in, like each size will come in cradled in different thicknesses, and you have a whole option, like a whole like selection you can choose from.
How would you finish one of those pieces? Do you have to put a varnish on it to protect it, or it's just, does it need to be framed behind glass? Like, are we worried about any type of transfer?
Well, the clay boards, I use a spray varnish. Normally, well, it varies. It can be matte or gloss. I normally go for matte, especially if I'm spraying airbrush and using different types of ink. Because obviously the different types of ink, the different blacks can, like, when you look at it in certain light, some of them can be glossy and shiny, and some of them can like stand out, or some be matte. It doesn't look that great. When you do a spray varnish, matte or gloss, it flattens them all down into one black.
One finish,
yeah. Really nice, like sort of like solid black color. So yeah, if I was going to frame it, I would definitely varnish it first with a spray, some kind of spray, normally a Krylon, matte or gloss, whatever you choose. I normally go for matte because I don't like the shine. With the scratch boards, you can just use fixative, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've actually never done that, to be honest with you, because I've never framed a scratch board. But apparently you use like some kind of weird fixative.
Yeah, because I'm always asking, because clay is also not always the most archival material because it's very organic. So I assume that by putting some kind of final varnish on it, it would probably help keep it together for, centuries later.
I mean, if I was going to frame any of these, I would always spray it. But a lot of them are sitting in my drawer. Like, I don't have any intention of frame them yet. But when I do, I will absolutely either frame them in a UV protected glass and spray them. In fact, I will do both those things.
So
I'll do.
If you had to do it, you would do it. That's great.
I'll do it properly. Sure.
We believe in you. We trust you to do the right thing. Question, because of the way you're layering your work and the way the work is built with either material, do you already know how you're going to approach layering the work? Because I feel like you're thinking in a way that I don't think. But before you start a piece, does your brain start thinking, okay, I need to work in light today, or I'm only thinking about my light? How does your mind work to decide how you're going to build the piece?
Well, the rule of thumb with ink is you start with all the shadows first. You put all the very dark blacks in first, all the very dark shadows. Then you go mid-tones, and then you do highlights. So kind of you start, but that varies. Like that's with an ink drawing, and with clayboard, exactly the same thing. Darks, mid-tones, then highlights. But then you can start going backwards. You can start adding more highlights in and like scratching into the mid-tones. So you start on those levels, dark, medium, light, and then you kind of do it all at once, if that makes sense. So you kind of start dark, medium, light, and then you have access to everything. Once it's on there, you have access to all those versions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I'm an oil painter and I kind of work the same way, but I do a mid-tone underpainting. So I do have kind of a mid-tone to start with, and then I build my dark, then redo my mid-tone, and then my highlights. But I feel one of the things as an oil painter is, as I work, I usually realize my dark are not dark enough. So I always go back and make my darkers. But it's kind of tricky because you cannot have the same approach when you're working in black and white or black and gray.
True,
yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm terrified of color, as you've probably noticed. This is actually a thing between men and females. That actually, I've noticed that females have a much better eye for color.
Is that a thing?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, well, guys are more prone to color blindness, and I find I mix up reds and grays all the time. It's weird.
What? Are you colorblind?
I do that. I literally have bought clothes that I thought were gray, and then my partner's like, that's red. That's like a red top you've got. Like, really? And then a few days later, I'm like, oh yeah, this is totally red. But I thought it was great when I bought it. And it might just be me, but like, I don't know. I struggle with color.
I think it's only you and people that are colorblind. So
Yeah,
I'm not a doctor.
I'm not colorblind because I can see red and green completely differently.
Right.
I mean, that was such a sweeping statement I just made, by the way, about like all men are colorblind. I don't mean that. I just mean that, like, for example, my girlfriend V, like her color range is phenomenal.
Right.
These colors that I don't even know are there. I'm like, wow, that's crazy to me.
Have you ever done those tests online? There's some on your phone where they say, you need to find a number in the color, and it's, let's say, a yellow square, and there's a number one that's a bit of a different of a yellow, and then you have to see how far you can go. How well do you do with those tests?
I don't remember exactly, but I think it was around 50-60%. I did something like that. It wasn't great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I believe the scientific explanation. I don't have the data based on female or male or whatever.
We need some facts now after.
But yeah, we're going to be factual. But I do know that people that see a different range of color have a different amount of cones in their eyeballs. So the way you see colors is little cones that basically send the messaging to your brain about what colors. And not everybody has the same amount of cones that read those colors in your eyeball. So
where do I get more cones from?
I think you're born with it. I think that ship has sailed, mate. It's gone.
Your bad genes.
But I think maybe you should try those glasses. For colorblind people. Like, I don't know if you've seen those videos on TikTok. I always cry when people see colors for the first time.
That's why I wear these, so I can see some kind of color.
I think those isn't that for night vision?
They just make me look cool. That's why I wear them. But no, they are good for night. It's good for nighttime.
Right. Okay.
Walking at nighttime.
That's great. Let's
when I'm in the bush outside someone's house, I always wear those just so I can see everything.
I think you should keep working in black and white. I think this is a great.
I love color, but I like I like blocks of color. I like to sort of mix big blocks of color with black and white and merge it in. I've done some oil, but I mean, this isn't oil painting here actually, but this is just a weird experiment I was working on with like cutting out like some wood cutouts and stuff. But this is oil paint here, and it's okay. I mean, again, I haven't used like realistic skin tone or anything because that scares the shit out of me. But like, this is mainly acrylic. Oh, that's my face there.
Yeah, and you know the background color is red, right? On this.
I do know that. Yeah.
Checking.
I do know that. But this is again just a silly experiment, but. I love color, but I find that like I end up I kind of always default to certain colors, and I don't really know why, to be honest with you. I feel like I need to head into a new era of using more color.
I'll tell you something that I do some art coaching when it comes to like helping artists with marketing and stuff like that. And one of the things I tell my students is stick to what feels right to you. Like, I feel as an artist, sometimes we want to develop, we want to learn more, but it takes us away sometimes to what we love and what our instincts are. Like, if you always want to work with turquoise and pink, just stick to that. Like, why force yourself to work with purple if you hate purple, for example? Like, stick to
I wouldn't force myself into doing stuff I don't want to do.
I was not trying to give you art advice. Just like
I was going to say, am I paying for this? Is this a podcast or is this a class? No. I do agree with you though, and I'm not. I think that one of my problems as an artist is that I get excited about stuff. I'm like, oh, I want to try that. Oh, I want to try that. Oh, I should do that. And I end up kind of like spreading myself a little bit thin because I'm excited about making art. I love creating stuff, and I'm good at rendering stuff, and I like for example, like recently I'm really getting into the idea of sculpting. Like, I feel like I really want to start sculpting. Like, I just have this like urge to sort of go a bit bigger and a bit more hands-on, and kind of getting a bit tired of flat 2D surfaces. But although like painting is more like sculpture, like the stuff I do is more like meticulous and a bit I don't know, sort of like in a way draining when you're working small, which is why I then moved to big canvases, because I feel like I can like stretch my arms and take a breath of fresh air. Throwing paint around I find very relaxing, I think. but like the idea of sculpture, like really being able to like see around an object, see the 3D, the back, the front, the sides, I find that really exciting. So I do think at some point I will move in that direction.
You do have some 3-dimensional collectibles out there.
I do, yeah, but they're never like there's always a third party sculpt. Like I'll pay like a 3D sculptor to use my drawing as a reference point and then sculpt it. I've done that a bunch recently, actually, and I do like doing that as well because I love collabing with other creative people. And it's also it's exciting for me to see what they're going to come up with. It's like I'm part of the project. It's based on my artwork, and I'm going to see this new version of it that I've never seen before. And it's still mine, but it's not mine. And I think there's some weird connection there, and I really enjoy that. It's almost like I'm making something, but I'm not making something. You know, like I do enjoy that part of it, but I would like to go bigger and sort of. I'm pretty good with faces, as are you. I'm pretty good with faces, and I like the idea of sculpting a face and sort of becoming one with it. You know, there's something that excites me about that. So I think in the next few years, I'm gonna dip a toe in.
Oh, I love sculpting. I can't sculpt what I'm painting, but I have so much material here. I have air clay, I have polymer clay, I have monster clay, and sometimes I like to sculpt little monsters, totally unrelated to my art, but I sculpt little like gremlins and goblins and stuff like that just for fun sometimes when I need to be creative, but
no one knows that. That's you should do you have one you show us?
No, it's just for fun. It's
I
just
like that.
You know, when painting becomes the job, sometimes you almost need another creative outlet other 100%. Than what you 100%. Spit out.
And that's kind of the danger with, it's not danger, I suppose, but the conundrum with like doing your job, your hobby as a job.
Right.
It starts to cross over in some ways that I don't always like.
Then you need another hobby, you know?
Not 100%. But then it's normally, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll do sculpting as a hobby. And then that will become a job, maybe, who knows. But like, I feel like it always, because I take it so seriously and I love it. And I love the idea of doing a hobby as a job, which essentially is what I do. But then there's just that worry that it becomes more of a job than a hobby, you know, and then you start to sort of, when you need to make money out of something, it becomes a problem. Money ruins everything, you know. So I feel like it kind of becomes a problem.
I agree. I think it's always about keyword life work balance, you know,
true.
Synergy. I'm gonna put all my corporate keywords out there. But yeah, I think it's about still finding time for yourself and do stuff that you love. And I think there's pieces that you create that will be for you, and pieces that you create are just for the job.
100%. I feel like most of the pieces I've made the last 2 years have been for me.
Right. Well, that's good. I think that's
awesome. It's good. It's been it's been a slow couple of years. I think most artists would agree with that. But you never stop. Like, I'm never going to stop making artwork. Like, I just changed what I was doing. I was like, I'm just going to do whatever I want because it doesn't seem to matter currently. So yeah, I think it's just always make art. Like, I'm never going to stop making art.
Well, from the outsider perspective, when I look at your work, I still think that it's very you. I still see all your work as very Paul Jackson.
Yeah, I always struggle with that a little bit because I was always like, what's my kind of hook? What's my thing? You know, you have a hook, you have the double eyes, that everyone knows that's yours. Whereas me, I'm like, what's my hook? And then I was chatting to my friend Buff Monster, and he was like, your work has an attitude. There's a certain attitude that you can't deny. Like, when people see your work, it might not have the thing in it, but people like that, I know whose art that is. It's yours, you know. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good way to see it, you know. Never thought of it like that. I always thought I needed a thing or a character or a hook, but actually, like you said, like, most people know when it's my work, and I think that's my thing. You know, I just have an attitude that sort of leaks into everything. You know.
Yeah, I think your work is very you. There's a few things in your bio that I think describe it well. I do like the noir pop art angle. I think that describes it well. I like the word noir because it's French, but I think like I get the vibe of it.
I did it just for you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
But no, you're right. Because I was trying to think I wanted like a little, almost like an elevator pitch of, it's like, how do you describe your artwork? And I'm like, it's not classic pop art. There's like a sort of a dark, shadowy edge to it.
Yeah.
It was like noir pop art, maybe. I mean, it might not be the right thing. I'm still toying around with it. I feel like feel like my art career is going to be in progress forever, and I'm cool with that. You know, it's always going to be evolving. So who knows?
It's supposed to be. Question. I'm just going to do that. Question. Time for a question. What kind of light do you have set up at your desk or in your studio? It's a silly question, but it's a very important question.
Totally. Well, as you can probably tell, I have like an alcove window here. I really like working in natural light. Black and white's a bit different because obviously I don't need any particular light for it. Whereas, you know, when you're working in color and skin tones and whatnot, obviously tungsten light affects like blue light and all those different things. So I have a lamp that actually has different, you can change the settings on it from tungsten to blue light to, there's another one. There's 3 versions. I don't know what the third one is, but I can change it basically. It's one of these ones with like the, can I show it to you? Can it's gonna work? Yeah, it's got like the magnifying thing on it.
Yep.
Covered in dust, by the way, because I don't really use it. So yeah, I use that, and then I have like like another tungsten light just to light the room up. So I have the room lit up with tungsten light, and then I have a specific lamp it's not tungsten. I go more like white light or blue light. It's a bit more like crisp. I don't have the technical terms for it, but yeah, I have a reasonable light set up. But I like working during the day when I get natural light. I find that I enjoy that best.
I'm the same way.
So I work more at night time. That's when my brain switches on.
Right.
Like at like 7 o'clock. I'm awake.
That's late. I'm like, if I could start working at any time, I would probably start working around 3 p.m.
Yeah.
So yeah, time to have some food. But
yeah.
These days, yeah, I'm chasing the daylight during the winter. So if I have hours in the morning, it has to be in the morning.
Yeah, it's a hard time of year, isn't it? Yeah, because it gets dark so early.
Oh yeah, and I need that daylight. I have 2 LED lights, 1 big industrial floodlight, and I have a ring light that I like because you can change the setting from cool to warm.
Yeah.
And even if I turn all of them on, it's still not the same as daylight. Yeah, there's nothing like the sun.
Cool to warm. That's what I was trying to say in the most
there you go.
Schoolboy way. Yeah.
How do you know when a piece is finished?
When my brain says so.
That's fair.
To be honest. But you know, like it's one of those things where most pieces of art you could keep going forever, right? But there's a certain point where you just get fed up with it. You're like, this is done. I'm done.
Yeah.
That's it.
Do you ever start a piece and then you change your concept completely as you work on it?
Yeah, I have done. I tend to be a stickler for just sticking to the plan, and then either loving it or hating it at the end, which I've done pretty often, to be honest with you. I try not to change things halfway through. I try and stick to the plan. And if it's really bad, and I have quite a good eye for things. When things aren't looking right, I'm really good with balance. I'm good at like balancing things out when it needs something here or here. I'm like, this isn't right. Normally when I let something go, when it's done, it's normally in the right place for me. I know it sounds weird, but I just feel like I know when something's off. When
you have your idea of what you're going to create, you have like your picture in mind, you did your sketch and everything. Do you already know if it's going to be on a particular surface, if it's going to be on paper or it's going to be a painting, or does it, what comes first? It's the chicken or the egg question.
Yeah,
the idea or the surface.
That's an amazing question. And that's something I've always found tricky, because depending on the idea and how strong you think it is, you're like, is this going to be just a little drawing that I just post on Instagram, then I put in the drawer? Or is it going to be a big painting, a big sort of like showstopper? Like that's something I've always struggled with, because I've never really known what is going to work. Like there's times when, like, for example, the Banalien drawing, which is like the alien coming out of a banana skin, it was just a joke. It was a stupid joke drawing, and it went mega viral and ended up making it into a bronze sculpture. I was like, I had no intention of that being anything, and then I'll do a piece that I've worked on for months and it will just disappear into nothing.
Oh, so, you never know what people are gonna love.
Exactly. And I don't make my art based on that assumption, but I do sometimes wonder if there's certain drawings I've done that could have had more impact or could have been hung in a gallery if it was presented in a different way. So I do struggle with that sometimes. And there's been times when I've actually done a drawing, I'm like, actually I feel like this deserves to be bigger and in color and on a canvas and have a different vibe, and I've redone it on a larger canvas. So yeah, it really it's a good question, because I do struggle with that, but it's, I don't know.
Do you find, so you just said do you think it deserves a better, let's say, presentation?
Yeah,
Do you feel like larger scale work is more important? Because,
I
you
just
know,
feel
you
like
know what
it's
I'm saying?
more like when it's stuff's hung in a gallery. For me, I like it to
Mhm.
be slightly bigger in scale. For example, if this is hanging in a gallery, cool and everything, but I like to sort of have to stand back. I think it's because maybe when I'm drawing, I'm like this, I'm like really close to something. So I
Right.
like to go to a gallery and kind of stand back and take it all in. And I do feel like scale feels more substantial. And that's not necessarily true, and maybe it's again because I work small and big, and I kind of work through different scale. I like working in different scales, but yeah, I feel like when something's framed and hung on a wall and there's paint dripping from it, you can almost see you can envision the artist standing in front of it and slaving over it. I kind of think there's something to do with that excites me more than a
Mm.
smaller drawing. Maybe
Maybe you feel like people experience
it's a
the
nicer experience,
process
yeah, a
more.
bigger
Right.
experience, yeah, I
Right.
think so.
Right.
And that's
Um,
I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just I'm actually trying to understand that myself. I just feel like sometimes you want to make an idea bigger and present it in a different way.
yeah, you want to make a statement.
Yeah, I think so. When there's an initial idea, I don't know whether I should go big or small. I don't know how to present the thing unless it's
Mhm.
for a job. When they're like,
Mhm.
I need this for a cover, or I need this for a poster, then I know what I'm doing. Because I know it's got to be a certain size. But when it comes down to my artwork, that's when I'm like, damn, do I do this on a clayboard, or do I do it on a massive canvas? Or do
Mhm.
I do it the same size just on canvas? Like, and I can honestly ponder over that for weeks sometimes
Oh,
before I come up with an idea.
yeah. So that is a good question because you don't really have the answer.
Yeah,
So
well, exactly. Yeah, an answer to that. Haven't figured that one out.
yeah, well, if we do, or if someone watched this and figure out the secret how to pick the size and the material, just
Yeah,
DM Paul.
thank you. Appreciate it.
When you work on your paintings, when you do something that is on canvas, for example, do you have any preferred brushes or paint? You use acrylic and oil, so you mentioned kind of everything. So
I use everything. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
totally mixed media, and brushes only really matter to me when it comes to oil painting. I think with anything else, honestly, I can buy brushes from the dollar shop and it doesn't really affect me too much.
right, right.
Oils always last, obviously, because it's like a slower drying thing. So I'll do like, and I haven't done this much. I've done this 3 or 4 times, maybe, but I'll prep the canvas normally with acrylic, some ink maybe, and then yeah, I'll do, and maybe some spray paint as well. Spray paint's kind of fun to work with, but I'll put all those kind of fast drying things on first, and then I'll put oil on top of that, and that'll be the final thing until it's dried. And then I know that people say you can't put acrylic on top of oil. I've done it. You can do it. It's just like it's not going to work for like a really beautiful finished piece. Whereas a lot of my
Right.
work on the bigger scale is very chaotic, and I kind of invite some of that chaos into it a little bit. So you can do it, but not if you're trying to do a beautiful, like your work, it wouldn't work, obviously. But for me, I like to go nuts with it and just throw stuff at a canvas, and brushes, whatever, it doesn't matter to me.
I think the worry about acrylic on top of oil is that oil needs air to oxidize and it can make your acrylic crack. So I think it's one of those archival issue
Yeah,
where
yeah. But then you can varnish it afterwards. It'll be fine.
yeah, for hopefully few years. I think the worry is how can it be preserved long term? I think that's the worry.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm like, I don't care. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
I
Like,
mean,
if someone loves it enough and it becomes worth something to them, they'll take care of it. They'll figure it out.
yeah.
But I'm not like, again, these are certain paintings with a certain aesthetic and a certain style where I'm not trying to make this like beautiful thing. I'm kind of like, I like the textures of it. I like the experimentation of it. And I normally will use like fast drying medium on oil. So it's normally pretty dry before I'm adding acrylic. I'm not like blending oils into the acrylic or anything.
Right.
I'm adding it on like fairly late in the process. Again, I just experimenting. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do.
You're a rule breaker. I love it.
I'm not trying to be a rule breaker. I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing half the time. I'm just enjoying myself. Do you know what I mean? And then I'll scratch into it with a pen and pencil, and I'm like, this looks good. This looks kind of good.
I'm just thinking 100 years from now, I'm somewhere we'll have a Paul Jackson piece. They're gonna be watching this, and they're gonna be like, "Oh no!" And then they're gonna be there. You're gonna have all the archival specialists.
Falls off the wall.
No, you have all the specialists
crumbles off the wall.
Little layers trying to fix the little cracked pieces. We need to preserve.
There's white gloves on, white gloves and like Q-tips.
Yes, we need to preserve.
I'm just laughing from beyond the grave.
Okay. Did you ever have like a really bad accident? Like you did something like this and you just like, oh, that did not work.
Not in that sense. I did rip a canvas once that I'd already finished, an oil painting actually, and this thing dropped on it, a corner of a cupboard dropped on it, and it ripped through the canvas. But I learned how to fix it with wax. You can fix a canvas with like basically another piece of canvas.
Right.
You put it over it, and then you can wax it all, like seal it closed with like this special wax. So that was kind of cool. I learned the process there, and it looks pretty good. It looks all right. But other than that, I've not really had any issues. Like I find with a painting, you can always fix it. You know, like it's kind of different with a drawing. Like if you really wreck it, it's kind of hard to fix. But with a painting, well, especially my style of painting, I just roll over it with the white and dull it down and paint over it. You know, and I find it has an interesting effect. So it's kind of hard to like really go wrong, I think, in painting. Personally, yeah.
I love that. What is the most expensive material or tool that you ever brought or that you own right now?
Oh, most expensive. The clay balls are kind of pricey, but I'm lucky that I have an endorsement with Ampersand actually, so they send me free stuff, which is incredible. So I'm very, very lucky there. But they're not cheap, but they're incredible. In terms of a tool, I don't really know, actually. I don't really use particularly expensive stuff, to be honest with you. I mean, I think everyone thinks that, and mind you, paper's expensive. You buy like nice sort of like cold press or hot press paper. That's kind of pricey. It's talking like $25 to $30 a sheet and upwards, depending on the size. People like to think that the more expensive the thing you have, the better your art's going to be, which is just simply not the case. I remember like growing up I couldn't afford to buy nice materials, and I just make do, and it worked out. You know, I buy these cheap pens from the art shop, the cheapest ones I could find. They kind of have the same effect as a Micron, which is another brand, Sakura Microns, the stippling pens I use. They all kind of have a shelf life anyway, right? So I find that I mean, I do buy nice stuff now, but that's not how I started. I was buying like whatever I could afford, like even like ballpoint, like biros. I would do drawings with those. They're like $1 a pen, like, or maybe 50 cents a pen. I could do big drawings with those, and they look pretty decent. So it's not really about the most expensive thing. I know it's not your question. I can't actually think of anything expensive that I have though.
No, but I mean that's an all right answer. I mean, I was talking about I was talking about it with another artist, and we were thinking about it. Sometimes it's a pigment. When it comes to oil, like a specific pigment can be very expensive.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And oil paint's expensive too, right? And I'm assuming you'll buy the professional level, which is really pricey stuff.
Right.
Really pricey stuff, actually. Like small tubes like this big, like $50 and stuff like that. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, I mean, I use Gamblin, and I feel like they well priced for the quality. Like
Gamblin is well priced, yeah.
Yeah, they're not that expensive unless you buy really, really rare pigment, which I don't. I use pretty basic colors. But yeah, oil paint is expensive. I think we ended up saying that our easel was a very expensive piece of equipment.
Yeah, this is only $100 though. It's like a
there you go.
Meeden.
Yeah.
Decent. Yeah. It's decent, but it's only $100. I mean, I know you can go nuts on that stuff, and I would it'd be great to have an easel where you could like turn it round, or it lies flat, and you can spend a couple of $100 on those pretty easily. Right. Haven't found the need for it just yet, but yeah, I tend to. I kind of have all the stuff I need. I don't often buy like really expensive gear, especially when I'm working like a smaller scale and I'm given free stuff from Ampersand. Like pretty cushy, you know, pretty cushy deal.
Do you ever go in the art store, but just buy stuff impulsively, like just because, oh, this color is really
Oh,
nice, I
all
should
the time.
get it?
Yeah, like pencil sharpeners, pencils. I just go in there, I'll buy 10 pencils that I think I might need, and then I just got stacks of pencils. I love drawing. We haven't talked about this, but I love drawing in graphite on like cold pressed paper. Like I love like cross hatching pencil, because you can get like them super soft and then get them nice and sharp. You can create the textures and all kinds of stuff. I really like working with pencil, and I find that quite a versatile as well. And then I like to paint, like add some acrylic into that. I'm trying to think of an example. I did the drawing of the mouth, the smoking mouth with like a cigarette in it. That was all pencil.
Yes.
Then I did the eyes with just two like pink splats of acrylic like paint. Love doing that kind of stuff. Those little pops of color with the sort of like the monotone. I love that kind of stuff.
See, this is what I love. You obviously master so many different material, and we're talking about your visual voice earlier. You're doing stuff on so many different surfaces. You're using basically all the materials out there, like all of it.
Greedy.
And but see, your voice is still so strong. Like we see your work, we know it's yours, but it's created with so many different things.
Thank you. Yeah, well, that's really nice to hear. Like I think it's sort of pros and cons, you know, like that's lovely to hear, and I'm pleased that you think that. But then I'm also like, then it goes back to that question about like, do you know how to present a certain idea? And I'm always like, well, I could do in oil paint, I could do acrylic, could do airbrush, could do ink, could do pencil, could do a mural. It's hard to know where to go, because I enjoy using all of it, you know, and that's kind of the problem, but also it's a good thing, you know. It's exciting, but then it can slow down me making a piece of art, because I can ponder over what to use for ages. And then I think that's when I get frustrated, and then I'll make these big pieces and use absolutely everything on it, you know. But it is like, I do enjoy sort of trying to push the boundaries of what should be used with each other. So, you know, using pencil with acrylic paint is kind of weird. I don't often see that. Not that I've seen it anyway. I'm sure it happens. I just find it exciting. And I think part of being an artist is you've got to keep yourself interested in what you're doing and be excited. Otherwise, it can become a bit stagnant. So I think you've got to be pushing yourself.
What's the worst material you used? Is this something you tried and you're like, that is not it? We just make it work.
Worst materials. I mean, spray paint is very difficult. I would love to say I'm good at spray paint and doing murals, but it's really difficult. Like the guys that have mastered that, the can control they're crazy good. That I find I'd love to be good at that, but it's just, that's like the 10,000 hours of experience that needs to come into play.
Yeah.
Being like living in Toronto currently, it's obviously the weather, like you only get sort of half the year to do that stuff, and then you lose the other half the year because it's too cold. So I end up sort of getting, if I do murals, you do it in the summer, and then you kind of find a flow, and then you're like, oh, I have to stop now because it's too cold. And so I've never really mastered that, and I find that very difficult to use. But I do like it, and hopefully I'll get better with it. I mean, oil painting, you make it look really easy. Like oil painting is very difficult. It's also great because it's so, you can work a lot slower. With acrylic paint, obviously it dries super fast and the colors dry really dull. But with oil paint, you can sort of choose your speed of drying and all that kind of stuff, which is great, but also quite difficult. And I find I've done a couple of oil paintings recently, and there's actually one up at Art Basel, little plug. There you go, which I really liked, but it was like I could tell that there's so many things I could have done better on it, and there's so much I was learning in that process, but it's very, very hard. Like it's like you said, you doing like the colors first and then going over it with the darks and then doing it again. That terrifies me, because I like to do something and it be done, you know, like, so that you paint something like knowing that you're going to come back to it and paint it again. I'm like, fuck, it stresses me out.
I don't know. I find acrylic and ink is so permanent. Like you put it down and it's just there. As for oil paint, you can keep moving it around. True. It's not always about adding more colors, but you can you can move your shadows to the left, to the right. You can move things around and sculpt them for a long time before it's just kind of stuck there. Yeah, I don't know.
It's more like sculpting in a way, isn't it?
Well, I like to think so, just because you can decide where your shadows are, so where your depth will be. Acrylic is terrifying. That's also why I don't like glazing. It's kind of the same thing, where glazing, you put a layer and then you have to think about what's going to be the next layer, and that just confuses my brain, and it's just not for me.
Well, one thing I did notice with acrylic paint, though, is once you can bring the acrylic paint back to its wet color by varnishing it. Like, it does bring it back to life.
Right.
Which is pretty cool. And I mean, there's some great, do you know Sarah Joncas?
Yes, of course.
Does she paint in acrylic or oil? I think it's acrylic.
Actually, she does a layer of acrylic, and then she does a layer of oil on top of it. And as far as I know, she doesn't varnish. So we'll have to get her on the podcast to talk about it.
I'd be curious to know, because like she has such a, like, the way, there's such a soft, smooth. Colors are amazing. And I thought I read that she did it in acrylic, and I was always like, how do you do that in acrylic?
No, she has a layer of acrylic and a layer of oil on top. And I believe, from what I know, is that she used water-based oil paint that they sell now, that water-soluble oil paint. So she does a layer of acrylic when she has her shape and her basic colors, and then a layer of oil paint on top. And I know that she doesn't varnish, which, or as far as I know, last time I saw originals, they were not varnished. And also that's why it's so matte and very velvety in person.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice. Yeah. I used to paint in acrylic pretty often. I used to do a lot of record covers in acrylic paint, but you got to work fast. And I do like working fast. So that did kind of suit me, but I did a couple of paintings that I entered into the National Portrait Awards years ago, and I was like, it has to be oil, you know, and I really enjoyed it, but it was challenging. And then I was sort of like, it kind of made acrylic feel a bit, I don't know, it felt really dull. Like the colors dried really dull, and it, like, I don't know, like oil kind of ruined acrylic for me, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like, I find acrylic really good for like prepping a canvas and adding in like base colors and stuff. But then if you want to go into like nice detail and like do the eyes maybe in oil, there's nothing better, you know?
Yeah, it's very rich. It's a rich pigment.
Very rich, yeah.
I think that's what it is. Where would you consider your art superpower versus your art kryptonite?
My superpower. I'm a pretty good ideas person, I think. I think I have quite good ideas. When I've got to come up with something quickly, and again, I don't do that much commission work these days. I'm still open to it though. Like, it's kind of where I came from. So I have like a part of me that finds it hard to say no to a job that I find interesting and maybe challenging. So I'm good with ideas. I'm very good at rendering an idea, I think, which is, again, very vague. It's very vague. It's a very vague superpower I'm coming up with.
You translate what's in your mind well.
Yes, sometimes. But I'm an ideas person. Well, I think I am anyway. I like to come up with ideas. I like concepts. But sometimes that, again, can be a problem, because then I'm too wrapped up in the concept and less in the sort of like visual interpretation of it, or the visual presentation of it, that I'm like, that's kind of why I stopped doing portraits for a while, because I couldn't justify who I was painting and why I was painting them. I was always like, I couldn't allow myself to paint someone without the reason.
I thought you did Francis Bacon not that long ago.
Yeah, I did. I've got him right here, actually. Yeah, this is on Scratchboard. I mean, I just did him because he's got an interesting face, and these are kind of not disposable, but like, I just wanted to do something, you know. I guess my biggest kryptonite would be knowing when to finish something, or like not overworking something.
Right.
A bit of a flaw of mine with my ink drawings is I overwork them a little bit, I think. Like, there's power in negative space and knowing when to stop, you know, and letting the light do the talking, instead of sort of insinuating like the shadow should be here, or like, I don't know, like forcing certain tones in that don't need to be there. I think that's something I'm still learning about.
Yeah, it's a good point. I feel like I'm trying to leave more space around my characters.
Space is really important.
Yeah, I feel like before I wanted to fill the space as much as possible.
Yeah.
And now I'm realizing that I don't need to. Like the interest of the pictures needs to breathe in the space.
Definitely, yeah. And you want to divert the eye. You want to like train the eye to be in a certain place. And when there's just so much to look at, people can get like overwhelmed by that and just like sort of move on, you know?
Yeah.
It's good to sort of direct the eye into a certain place. And that's kind of what I'm working on now with my bigger pieces that I want to start next year. Is they're very much focused on a particular detail, and the rest is kind of just mark making and noise. But it kind of like directs the eye into a certain place. I really like, do you know the painter Jenny Saville? So she does like those giant paintings with like, I think she uses like house paint, or she uses thick brushes like this wide. Just beautiful mark making pieces, like, but they look from a distance, they're almost like hyper real, but they're not at all. But then the eyes are very focused. I love that style of painting, and I kind of want to like use that as an inspiration for my next sort of batch of paintings.
Interesting. Yeah. What's next? What are you working on? Something specific?
Yeah, I've been working on a project for like 2 years now. Yeah, it's a weird one. It's kind of a mix of physical art and digital art, and I'm trying to merge them together. Completely out of my comfort zone, but this is where the collaboration with all these other artists, 3D sculptors, is coming in, and 3D animators. It's really exciting and interesting to me because I can't do it. So it's really exciting to have my work interpreted in these interesting mediums and ways.
Is there something in your studio that you could not live without? Like something, let's say, we'll take the example of like the desert island somewhere, and the one art supply you could bring.
Well, a sketchbook and a pencil for sure.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, I've got I've probably 1,000 ideas sitting in. I've got a whole shelf of sketchbooks here that are from over the years, and they're like my little Bibles, you know. There might be an idea in there I put down 10 years ago that might be relevant now still. I don't know. So before I do anything, I normally flick through them all and just sort of like see if there's anything floating around that I can use for this particular thing I'm doing. So yeah, I think a sketchbook, I always have a sketchbook on me, always.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're this big, sometimes they're this big.
You're the art kid with a sketchbook everywhere.
But I'm not really sketching. I'm not like, oh, stand still, I want to draw you. I'm not like that guy on the subway that draws people. I used to do that at school.
What I thought about.
Like now I'm just like, oh, idea. Quick,
right.
You know, smash it in there, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really important for me to have that. And normally if I get a good idea, normally touch wood, it stays in there until it's noted down and then it's gone. Like if I get an idea just before bed,
I know.
I'm lying in bed, I'm like, fuck, that's a really good idea. And
yes,
I fall asleep. The next morning I wake up, it's still there. I'm like, right, get that down. And then I can like jot it down and then it's gone.
Yes.
Hopefully that stays that way. Obviously my brain is deteriorating as all our brains are. I hope that that doesn't end. You know?
I have those ideas at night. And if I don't write it down, I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh no, I forget it. And I'm thinking, oh man, I was a genius before bed. Like this idea was going to be the best masterpiece in the whole universe. And then it's gone.
Yeah,
probably
there's
wasn't.
nothing worse than forgetting a good idea. It's brutal.
Yeah, it was probably not that great of an idea. It was probably like draw a tiger on a shirt. And I'm like, it's genius. And the moment you see
I've got it. Double eyes.
And
I forgot it. What was it?
And then it's gone. Hey, one of the reason it's going to be important. This you keep doing this and I keep doing it too. It's like I want to sync with you.
It's like a weird thing. I can't help it.
Like we're dancing.
It's like a weird tick. Yeah.
One of the reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast is one, obviously you're very talented. Two, you know so many things about material, about technique. And one of the other reason is you're one of the reason why I started doing art full time. So I just want to put that out there for people that don't know about my art career. But I was so stuck in the corporate world, like working full time in advertising, sales, and marketing. And we hung out a few times when I was still in Toronto. We had art projects together. We had art battles together.
Winners.
Yeah. But that said, you're the one who is convincing me to just quit the day job and do art full time.
I remember.
And I just want to say, like, you totally boosted my confidence to a level where I actually left the corporate job and started doing art full time. So I just want to say that you're the reason why I'm doing what I do now. So I want to say thank you.
Yay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. That's lovely. And I meant it. You're an immensely talented artist. And like, I remember you working that job, and you had a decent job, right? You were getting paid well. It was a good job.
Oh, yeah, it was a
But
big
then
job.
you were like sort of like, I don't want to do this job forever. And I was like, well, your art's great. Like, I'm doing it full time. Why aren't you doing it full time? Like, you just got to go. And I think I remember saying something like, you've just got to pull the plug. You just got to like immerse yourself in it and just take it as it comes. And I'm glad you did. And I hope it's working out. It looks like it is, which is great.
Yeah, it is. I'm doing all right.
Good. Well, yeah, you deserve to be doing all right. And
yeah, it's because of you. I want to give the credit where credit is due, and it's because of you. Like, you totally helped me, and you boosted my confidence, and you told me that I could do it, and I believed you, and I did it.
And I remember I think you quit your job like the next day or something, didn't you? It was like really quick afterwards. You were like, I've done it. I was like, oh shit, what have I done?
No, yeah, I was lining up shows, and I knew that enough shows and exhibits booked to, to keep me busy for a while.
Yeah.
And I think the day after, something happened at the corporate job, something I didn't want to deal with. And I did the whole thing where you walk in your boss office and you're like, I'm out. And I give 2 weeks. I was there for almost 10 years. And I give them 2 weeks. And on that 2 weeks, I went to Paris for 10 days. And I just, came back for 2 days, put my stuff in order, and I was just out.
What a great place to go and get inspired as well.
Yeah. It was amazing. But that's all because of you. So the corporate job might be mad at you now if someone watches this. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. I wasn't expecting to get that. Thank you. Yeah, I'm pleased. Yeah, you're an artist. You're an amazing artist. You should be doing art full time. So simple as that. Not everyone gets that opportunity, Yeah, I think when it's presented to you, you should take it. And there's always going to be another corporate job if you need it, and I don't think you will. But I think people forget that. Like, you got to take risks in life sometimes, like calculated, of course. But jobs are always going to be there.
Yeah,
just are. I agree. So I feel like if you get the opportunity to go out on your own and try something interesting and different, like, you only get one chance at life. You just got to go for it. So I'm really glad you did.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you made me do it.
Yeah.
If it didn't work out, though, I probably would have been mad at you forever.
Yeah, right. If I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah. Paul did that to me. You told me before that you keep a lot of your originals, and then you sell a lot of prints. Is that still the balance of your practice, or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't offer my originals that often. Sometimes I do, because sometimes there's so many now that I feel like it's a bit of a shame just to leave them living in a drawer forever. Plus, if I can make money out of selling them, of course I'm going to do that, as long as the price is right. Because I don't like giving art away. I don't like. Yeah. When I say that, I'd love giving art away to a friend, but I mean, like, selling it too cheap, I think that's a crime.
Yes,
I want to value yourself.
I don't know where it is. It's in my bookshelf, but I do. Oh, it's right there. I do own a Paul Jackson original, which I paid full price for, and
he's like that big.
Big, and I love it. It's in my bookshelf.
Yeah, and it's framed as well, right?
It sure is. Should I go get it? I don't know if I can, because I have a bunch of canvases in front of my bookshelf.
I remember that show.
Oh yeah. All that. There's so much crap in my studio.
That's what they're for.
Yeah, I just show the nice part, but the other half is just packed with stuff.
There it is.
Oh.
The little hand solo.
That's right.
Yeah, looks good. Go.
Yeah.
You love Star Wars, don't you?
I do.
You love Stormtroopers. I remember that.
I
Hands
do.
blaster. Oh, you covered the price. How much was it?
It's $250.
Oh, you
I
paid
know,
$250 for
steep
that.
price. I paid full price for it. Look at
Sorry
that.
about that.
I love it
Maybe a
though.
print or something.
It's so good. Like people can't see, I'll post it on the screen, but people can't see how detailed this little thing
Yeah.
is.
That was the
It's
Star Wars. It was like an unofficial Star Wars show, wasn't it?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love it. I have it in my studio. So
That's amazing.
I'm a supporter of Paul Jackson.
Yeah, you are.
So obviously you have a lot going on. You're working on your paintings, you're working on all your boards and different materials. Is there any projects that you have coming up that's unrelated to physical artwork, like your paintings and stuff like that?
I'm working on a book. I promised myself this is the year I'm going to put a book out. I've been sort of planning on doing a book for probably 5 years now. But I have so much work. I've got 10 years plus of work. And I feel like I want to move in a slightly different direction. So I want to put all this stuff in an archive and have it available for people to have in one place. And it'd just be good for me to go through it all. And I think it's a good time to sort of reflect on all the work I've made and where I'm at. And maybe it will speak to me in terms of what I have been doing right or doing wrong, or things I need to fulfill with my art. I feel like it's time to reflect on it all. So I'd like to put a book out this year. That's my aim. Sorry, next year, 2025. Until recently, I was like, yeah, I think I need to do that. I need to sort of almost like relearn everything I've done and sort of go over it all and figure out what my voice is through it all, And I do mostly know that, but I feel like sometimes it's easy to get lost and sort of, I don't know, just each day is just the same, and I like the idea of going through all my work and sort of working out sort of highs and lows of my career to this point, and I don't know, just reflecting on it.
Well, we'll have you back on the podcast to talk about it when it's published.
That'd be great. I would love that. Yeah.
Amazing. Is there anything else you want to share?
Well, next year's, I'm hoping it's going to be a pretty good year for me in terms of my projects and the creativity that I've been working on for the last 2 or so years. So I'm hoping to sort of start showing what I've been doing, and hopefully people will be interested in that. And it's just a bit different, a bit weird, and sort of it's just an extension of my work in my own sort of way, creating my own IP essentially. So I'm excited for that. I have a new toy. I don't call it a toy. It's like an art sculpture, like a piece of art that I'm going to be releasing in March. So I'm very excited for that. You've seen it. You like it. So
I love it.
It's
amazing.
Hopefully going to be something that people are interested in. So it's going to be an interesting year. I'm excited for it.
So that leads me to, if people want to find out more about your upcoming releases or follow your pretty face on social media, where can they find you?
Well, probably the best place to start is Instagram, which is Paul Jackson Lives. And through there, you can get to my link tree, which will lead you to my mailing list, which I suggest you join, because that's where you'll find out first about anything I'm doing. And that also links to my store. So at Paul Jackson Lives is probably the best place to go.
Great. Amazing. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Alex. Great to see you again.
We'll talk soon.
Yeah, I hope so. See ya.